What's up, college football addicts? Today I have an absolutely insane episode for you, as the chance of a team leaving the ACC very soon has just dramatically increased. And the possibility of that is maybe going to set off a chain reaction as other teams move closer and closer to pulling the ejection seat before the all-important June 30th deadline arrives. I'm going to get to all of that, but before we get started, we'd like to welcome you to College Football Addiction. Very happy to have you. If you enjoy our content, or if you don't enjoy the content, but it does move you and causes you to feel some type of emotion, do me a favor and subscribe below. Now, first, I am hearing that there is a good chance that FSU could play this upcoming 2024 season outside of the ACC. Now, I'll repeat it for you because I know you probably just think, wait. Are you sure about that? I am hearing there is a good possibility that Florida State University could play this upcoming 2024 football season outside of the Atlantic Coast Conference. So let me stop right there. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I am saying those words out loud, and I'm right there with you. Those words sound absolutely bananas to me. But before you go racing down to the comments to tell me how crazy I am, just hear me out. And trust me, what I'm about to tell you is real, and you better buckle up for this one. What I'm going to explain today is going to have massive impacts on every team in the ACC and in the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10. I also want to warn you guys that I'm not going to be right on everything that we discuss on this channel. Part of what enables us to give you information faster than On3 and 247 is that they have to wait for word to become official. Our threshold for discussing things is that things are more likely than not going to happen. But I do promise you this: if you keep count, we're going to be a lot more right than we are wrong. And if we're wildly speculating on something that's a long shot, I'm going to tell you that beforehand. And if we tell you something is a done deal, you can also just go ahead and take that to the bank. So what are we talking about today with FSU? I would honestly put the odds at slightly over 75% that they don't play this year within the ACC. And after I explain to you guys why FSU would do this, I think most of you are going to agree with that percentage. So getting back to FSU, what we're hearing is that their plan is in place for them to go independent for the 2024 football season. Now, I'll tell you this is something that was rumored and that I heard months ago, and I personally shot down and said to the people who whispered it to me, there is no chance. Schedules are already set. There's no way that they will not be in the Atlantic Coast Conference this year. And now I'm backtracking on my own thoughts. And I know that you think I'm crazy, but we're going to get to why we think that that could be a possibility. What could that possibly look like, though? First off, the current schedule would not change. Trying to change hotels, air travel, where games are played this late into the process is unrealistic. So if this happens, you can expect that Florida State would play its current ACC schedule. Now, next, this would lead to some emergency court filings because they would need to be expedited decisions on whether or not the grant of rights is enforceable or not. If a judge rules it's not, Florida State University is going to put up their home games for bid, and they're going to end up making more money than they would in the ACC. And I know there are a lot of non-FSU fans listening who might be getting bored with this. I'm talking to you Clemson, North Carolina, NC State, Duke, Virginia, Pittsburgh fans. You're going to want to stick around, though, because we have a tidbit at the end, something special for you guys in just a moment. Back to FSU. Why would they do this? To me, this is a masterclass in game theory. And it's really just simple math. If you believe that the ACC is going to drag out this court case for as long as possible to keep Florida State in the conference, which they plan to do, and if you've determined that you are worth more independently than in the ACC, which they are, and you believe that the grant of rights is null and void and legally unenforceable, which Florida State believes that, all of those add up to the fact that you have nothing to lose by going independent for a year. You still have a path to the college football playoffs. You have Notre Dame, so you have a tiebreaker because you play them on the road in South Bend to determine this already built into your schedule. If FSU is right about the grant of rights, they get more for being an independent. They expedite their legal case because there's no longer anything to gain by locking them into the conference. And I'll even give you an added bonus as to why FSU would choose this path. FSU can't just leave the ACC and flee to the SEC because ESPN owns both conferences and it creates a legal problem. But if FSU goes independent for a year, beats the ACC in court, it dramatically reduces the legal risk and allows FSU to consider all options on the table. But I know what you guys will say. What's the worst case scenario? What if this goes horribly wrong for FSU? Let's talk about that. If the worst case scenario plays out for FSU and the court rules that the ACC does get to keep its home game rights until 2036, something that I'd say is probably less than a 10% chance of happening based on legal findings, I'd still argue that this is a smart decision. You're going to have to buy back your full rights, which was already going to happen. You expedited the settlement, which is a benefit. My point is this: if you're deciding that staying in the ACC is not acceptable for your program's future, then the worst case scenario will cost you exactly the same, whether you stay in the ACC this year or leave. So when you do the math, this isn't particularly a tough decision for FSU. Now, yesterday, Reddit College Football made a pretty valid point on Twitter when they posted, today's legal filing from Florida State specifies that the ACC seeks to control FSU's media rights for a dozen years after FSU exits the ACC. 12 years before 2036 is 2024. So moving on to all the other ACC teams, we recently told you guys that the Magnificent Seven are back in talks. For those of you who aren't aware, the Magnificent Seven were the 7 ACC teams in discussions to dissolve the conference last year: Florida State, Clemson, UNC, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Miami. It's believed that you would need 8 votes to dissolve the ACC because of the simple majority spelled out in contract law in North Carolina. A few days after our video, Brett McMurphy dropped this tweet when he said, "Giddy up, that's 2 now of the ACC's Mag 7 likely to leave." But is this really just the tip of the iceberg as far as the renewed push to dissolve the league? A few days later, we released a video going into great detail why the mid-tier ACC teams have a June 30th deadline for deciding whether to dissolve the league. Now, in that video, we provided numerous reasons as to why this made good sense for the middle ACC teams like Miami, Louisville, Duke, Virginia Tech, Pitt, and NC State, and why they needed to pull the trigger before Stanford, Cal, and SMU joined and thus raised the voting thresholds. We warned folks about being trapped in the conference without Florida State, Clemson, and UNC, when ESPN would then have the power to force you to lower your media deal or just end it altogether. That's not necessarily ESPN negotiating from a position of strength. That is negotiating with a gun to the other person's head. And you can't win like that. We told you guys, pretty much all of you have homes in the Big 12. And we also did a video on how it's possible that several of you may even find your way to the Power 2. And negotiating with your options open is always going to be a far better situation. And now here's the mind-blowing part. What if 8 teams dissolve the conference to avoid the ACC buyout? The grant of rights dies with it immediately, and all the teams in the ACC followed FSU's plans. Everyone in the ACC agreed to play the 2024 season as independents, playing the schedule as laid out, auctioning off their media rights. You mid-tier ACC teams, would this not provide you the perfect opportunity to negotiate what is in the best interest of your program? It buys you a full year of making the best possible decision, whether that's to reform the ACC, whether that's to join the Big 12, or whether that is to take a partial share in the Big 10 or the SEC. At the end of the day, it gives you options, and options are the best thing you can have when negotiating a contract. There's no way you guys want to be held hostage by the group of 5 schools that are joining the ACC. No offense to SMU, Cal, Stanford, BC, Wake, Syracuse, and Georgia Tech. But everyone in the ACC is looking out for their best interest. And when Florida State, Clemson, and UNC are gone, that's all that you'll be able to do. The group of 5 teams are going to be an absolute chain around your wrists. And like I told you in another video, if you don't believe me, here is my challenge to all of the ACC ADs. Try to negotiate an exit path from the league yourself. See if they allow it, or if they try to trap you worse than what they've done to Florida State, Clemson, and UNC. In closing, I have one final ask of you. If you are a fan of those teams, if you truly care about your program and you believe in this video, do me a favor and share it with other fans. We don't ask for shares very often because YouTube will find the people who are interested, but I would absolutely suggest sharing and tagging your ADs, your board of trustees, your board of chancellors, whatever your school has, if you're part of these programs that I've mentioned. Now, FSU has created the perfect win-win scenario for teams to escape the sinking ship that is the ACC with a 1-year streak of independence. And by working together, it's on the other teams to take the lifeboat and not let the group of 5 schools tie you down. FSU is going to beat the grant of rights, and your lawyers already know this. But whether FSU, Clemson, and UNC have to pay some of the buyout or not, it's certainly not going to be enough money to save you from having this anchor around your programs until 2036, with ESPN being the only one who has the power to remove that anchor and unilaterally blow up the deal. I also got one more juicy nugget, and if you stuck around to the very end of this video, I appreciate you. But we've talked a lot about our composition clause. It's something we've covered extensively over on the Double Fries channel within the ACC agreement. Now, ESPN could be blown up and not pay anything to the ACC schools that are remaining if 2 or more schools leave the conference before June 30th. That's the nugget that we have for you. We'll see if anything comes of that. But obviously, that June 30th deadline is approaching, like we told you in a previous video, because of Cal, Stanford, and SMU joining the very next day. I know a lot of you are familiar with a certain message board thread. Shout out to Regal Knoll for all that he does to alert the masses on the On3 FSU page. The goal of today's video is to continue to do our part to crater this godforsaken conference. Again, if you would do us the favor of sharing this, we certainly would appreciate it. I am down to hear your thoughts. I know it's out there. I know it sounds crazy, but don't be shocked if things start to play out the way that we're telling you. It is ludicrous. I told you earlier, saying it out loud sounds ludicrous, but don't be shocked if and when it starts to go down. I appreciate you guys for watching. I appreciate your passion down in the comments. I appreciate your support for our channel. Thank you guys for hanging out at College Football Addiction.